Two things kept Michael Morton afloat during the quarter century he spent behind bars: his faith in God and his hope to reunite with his son Eric, who was 3 when Morton went to prison for his wife's murder. Morton was exonerated last year after DNA evidence proved his innocence. Soon after he saw Eric, who had believed his whole life that his father was a killer. It was their first meeting in 14 years. Eric was 28.
He was a stranger that I didn't know. And in my head, I'd prepared for the possibility that he might be a real jerk, because I hadn't raised him. I didn't know what kind of young man he had been, or young boy, or I knew him as the little kid. I was very pleasantly surprised, and he was anything but a jerk.
Michael Morton's wife, Christine, was beaten to death in bed at the home the family shared in North Austin. He went to work the morning of August 13, 1986, and came home to find a swarm of sheriff's deputies and police tape surrounding their house. 6 months later, he was convicted of the murder and sent to prison for life.
I didn't do this. I'm sorry, what? I did not do this.
Michael Morton's exoneration last year, brought to a crescendo in Texas, calls for change in the way that prosecutors are regulated. While DNA led to Morton's exoneration, his lawyers also discovered that critical pieces of evidence were kept from his defense team during his 1987 trial.
He made it impossible to defend myself. My lawyers, Bill White and Bill Allison, at trial, they were operating with one hand tied behind their backs.
Morton's case, though, is not the only one in which the courts have ruled that prosecutors' errors contributed to the wrong outcome. The Texas Tribune reviewed court rulings in 86 cases in which defendants' convictions were overturned from 1989 until 2011. In nearly 25% of those cases, 21 in total, the courts decided that prosecutors made mistakes that in most cases contributed to the wrong outcome. The men and women convicted in those 21 cases spent more than 270 years in prison. Yet, according to the State Bar of Texas, just 3 prosecutors have faced public discipline, and none of those reprimands had anything to do with the overturned convictions. Morton and advocates for criminal justice reform are urging lawmakers and the State Bar to do more to hold prosecutors accountable when they make mistakes that cost innocent people decades of liberty. Jennifer LAURIN is a professor at the University of Texas School of Law.
I mean, right now, there is next to zero sort of oversight of what prosecutors do. The rules that we have are, at least in part, designed to protect the innocent.
Many prosecutors in Texas, though, say that in the wake of high-profile cases like Morton's, advocates are overstating the problem of prosecutorial misconduct. It's a very rare occurrence, they say, and there are systems in place now that deal with it effectively. Joe SHANNON is the district attorney in Tarrant County and a former criminal defense lawyer.
It's not the system that's broken. It is from time to time the humans who manipulate the system that are broken. And human error is a natural part of any process, be it law, be it running a restaurant or whatever. It's just going to happen.
In Michael Morton's case, former prosecutor and current state judge Ken Anderson will face a court of inquiry this fall to determine whether he should face criminal charges for withholding evidence that pointed to Morton's innocence. Morton's lawyers say that Anderson withheld a transcript in which Eric's grandmother told an officer about a conversation with a 3-year-old who told her he saw his mother's killer and that it wasn't his father. And despite a judge's order to turn over evidence to Morton's lawyers, they never received reports that neighbors saw a suspicious green van casing the Morton home, or that someone had fraudulently used Christine Morton's credit card after her death. Anderson has apologized that the criminal justice system erred in Morton's case, but he has rejected allegations that he did anything wrong. In a 9-hour deposition with Morton's lawyers, Anderson said repeatedly that his memory of the case had faded.
But the answer to any of those questions is that I have no specific recollection of things that happened 25, 24, 23 years ago.
Suppression of evidence, like what happened in Morton's case, was the single most common error among the 21 overturned Texas convictions that involved prosecutorial mistakes. In 17 of the cases, the courts ruled that prosecutors failed to give defense lawyers information that pointed to their client's innocence. Kerry McCook's conviction for a 1977 murder has yet to be overturned, but the courts in his case found that prosecutors withheld several critical pieces of evidence and misled jurors about others.
Murphy's Law personified everything that could go wrong in a prosecution did and has and still continues to.
Although DNA evidence has since pointed to his innocence and he is out of prison, in the eyes of the law, Cook is still a convicted murderer because he accepted a plea deal with prosecutors. Now he is fighting to once and for all clear his name.
When I was thought to be a criminal, they put me in jail for 22 years. Why can't they be punished for their wrongdoings?
Jennifer LAURIN explained that a court finding of error doesn't necessarily mean that a prosecutor committed misconduct.
Sometimes when people speak of prosecutorial misconduct, the image that comes to mind is the sort of nefarious individual trying to, frame an innocent man. And unfortunately, in the course of human history, that has occurred. But, even in the category of intentional, or at least sort of knowingly stepping over a line, I think frequently that can occur simply because well-meaning prosecutor is sort of caught in the heat of battle.
Dallas County District Attorney Craig Watkins was the first prosecutor in Texas to establish a special unit to investigate possible wrongful convictions. And 37 of the 86 overturned convictions from 1989 to 2011 came from Dallas County.
We actually have created a laboratory, and we've pretty much been able to identify the problems with our criminal justice system because of exonerations. And so we've seen that largely the problem deals with what we call tunnel vision. When a person is in your sights, the people involved with investigating and pursuing a prosecution go forth in confirming that this person is an individual that should be prosecuted.
While ethical and constitutional requirements call for prosecutors to turn over evidence that could help the defense, so-called exculpatory evidence, in Texas, prosecutors are allowed to decide what is exculpatory and whether to give it to defense lawyers. Among the reforms that some advocates have suggested to prevent evidence suppression is a law requiring prosecutors to make their files open to defense lawyers. Sam Bassett is an Austin-based criminal defense lawyer.
In the past, we have entrusted prosecutors to completely, at their discretion, be sure that they follow the mandates of Brady. And the real challenge is that hasn't worked in many cases, and many people have suffered as a result.
Bassett worked with Morton's lawyers during the 1987 trial. At the time, he was a second-year law student, and his work on the Morton case was his first major trial.
There's no doubt in my mind that we did not know any of the information that has come to light in the last year or two.
What happened in the Morton case, and the number of cases in which courts have found that prosecutors withheld evidence, Bassett said shows that there is a need to ensure better compliance with laws of evidence in criminal cases.
Brady obligations need to be taken seriously, and I hope this has been a wake-up call for many.
In Tarrant County, Joe Shannon said his office has had an open file policy for 3 decades. Defense lawyers there now have electronic access to nearly everything in the prosecutor's files.
And so it just worked well. And what we do is we try to play an open hand, and we show them what we got. And if a defense attorney has got some concerns, many times they will say, well, wait a minute, I've got witnesses that say blah, 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 which is different from what you police have said. And we find out that maybe we don't have the whole story.
But open file policies are not a panacea, reform advocates say. Prosecutors must face tougher sanctions if they are found to have committed a deliberate error that resulted in a wrongful conviction. Currently, the statute of limitations for a prosecutorial misconduct violation expires after just 4 years. But often it takes much longer than that to uncover hidden evidence once a person is convicted. Nearly 25 years in Michael Morton's case. A prosecutor who withheld evidence, they say, should remain responsible for a mistake that cost an innocent person decades of wrongful imprisonment.
That young prosecutor will always remember, if I cheat, today I'll win, but 20 years from now, I may be held accountable. And it just in my estimation, makes sense.
Michael Morton has some suggestions, too, about what consequences prosecutors ought to face.
Number one, make the prosecutors liable for a small fine if they get caught doing something wrong like this. And number two, put their law license in jeopardy if they got caught doing something wrong like this.
Prosecutors, though, urge caution when it comes to sanctions. They say they need immunity from lawsuits by disgruntled criminals with nothing but time on their hands in prison.
We need to deal specifically with the ones that are intentionally, knowingly doing things that deprive people of their rights.
The key to changing the criminal justice system, though, Watkins said, is not legislation, sanctions, or policy changes. It's a matter of culture, from the police who arrest and investigate to the district attorneys who prosecute and the judges who oversee the cases.
And unfortunately, a lot of times we find that the truth may not be the issue. The issue may be winning.
Michael Morton says he can't imagine that his case and the outcome of the court of inquiry that examines Ken Anderson's role in his prosecution won't have some effect on changing the culture of the Texas justice system.
If nothing happens, then they're going to wipe their brows and go, "Whew, we can still do anything we want, not worry about it," only be tethered by their own moral compass.
Despite the nightmare he endured for 25 years, Morton says his life is good now, and he's focused on making the best of his freedom and getting to know his son Eric.
Because I can't change what happened. No amount of time, effort, money, relationships, or anything like this is going to change what happened. I can't make up for those lost years. But what I can do is try to prevent it from happening to the next person.